The Nuggets' first losing streak of the season has come as they fall to the Cleveland Cavaliers after losing the Pelicans on Friday. What went wrong? What's going on? Is there cause for concern? And bigger picture, let's talk about the non-Jokic minutes and what the Nuggets need from their guys. All that and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us your first listen. We appreciate all you everydayers checking in with us each and every day throughout the week. We are on all platforms, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all over. We appreciate 5-star reviews. We appreciate you guys going to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and giving us a like and subscribe because it's the best way to support the show. And we appreciate you guys being a part of the community. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Adam Mares, director of content for DNVR. Adam, the Nuggets are on a losing streak. It finally has happened. It happened a little bit later than I thought it would have happened. I was like, wow, like we're in mid to late November, almost to Thanksgiving, and they haven't been on a losing streak yet. That's pretty good. But they do fall to the Cleveland Cavaliers after losing to the New Orleans Pelicans. Let's start right here. Oftentimes, I think with losing streaks, it's very easy to be like, one thing is the problem. These two games were wildly different, where the bench was a problem on Friday night versus the Pelicans, and Jokic was awesome. And on Sunday night, the Nuggets did not have it, were completely flat, and the Nuggets were minus 16 in Jokic's minutes. And without Jamal Murray, that means you were almost definitely going to lose every single time.
Well, hold on. The bench was also bad, though, in this game as well. It just... The starters were also bad in this one.
Were also bad. Yes, they weren't. Neither one was good.
Right.
The garbage time wound up making a little bit of a difference in some of the numbers. But
which, by the way, was good. I mean, there was some stuff in garbage time I kind of liked. We can get to if we want to. That's like a chance to scout that second unit and see if they have anything. But as far as the game goes, I mean, this one against the Cavs, I'm of two minds of it. One, I thought Jokic had a bad game. He has looked tired, he has looked frustrated. When we see him get into foul trouble, take 3-pointers or get technical fouls, usually it's some sign of fatigue, like mental and emotional and physical fatigue. Tonight, he picked up his 4th and 5th foul right out the gate in the third quarter, both of which were pretty dumb. The second one, the 5th one, almost felt like he was trying to make a point, so he gets called for a little chicken wing, which I didn't actually love the first one. I understand why you get it, but I still didn't love it. I thought it was a good sell job, but all right, you get that foul. Well, Yoke seemed like he was so bothered by it that he's like, I'll show you a chicken wing. And then comes down and gives a deliberate chicken wing to get his 5th foul. And you're sitting there thinking, Yoke, you're down, I don't know what it was, 13. I have to go. If you're out, the game's over. I mean, that was effectively the end of the game.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen that from him before where he gets frustrated when he doesn't feel like the officiating is not being applied fairly on both ends. I will say that Nikola tends to be like, oh, you didn't call it on that end. Okay, well, if you're not going to call on that end, then we'll play this style. It's when it's inconsistent that I think he tends to get frustrated. Tony Brothers tonight, it's funny because I was posting stats on Twitter. I was like, look, this is the record straight up when Tony Brothers officiates. And Harrison very, very, sagely was like, well, what's their ATS record? And I was like, well, one, that's kind of tough because spread's an entirely different conversation. But the point is kind of fair. I don't I'm not going to sit here and claim that there's no problem with how Tony Brothers officiates Jokic. I've done enough of this, and it takes a lot to get me to that threshold. Tim Duncan had his guy. Everybody has their official that they just simply do not get along with and do not get the right, they do not get officiated fairly by. And for Jokic, it's Tony Brothers. And that's absolutely the case. But also, I mean, can't be it's totally fine if you do that. No, come on, we're at this point in your career, better. Can't be picking up those kind of fouls and take your team completely out of it.
That's what made the game over. I mean, it was already I think a 13-point game at that point. Denver was just getting cooked tonight. I mean, and it was one. And so when I say I was two of minds, one of them was those things that I mentioned, Yoke getting kicked out. But the other part of this is a team that has 2 front court players. We know what a challenge that is for Denver. And the solve to that challenge is often, well, then you're going to be able to run the pick and roll game. You're going to be able to play the outside game. But without Jamal Murray, of course, that part doesn't work. And so you kind of have to pound the ball to Yoke on the elbows and inside. And, tonight he just didn't have it to go up against the Twin Towers. So, I don't know. It sort of is what it is. But but Jokic didn't have it tonight, so everything else was kind of nullified.
It's funny. Swipa commented that they're 9-4 and they were 9-4 last year. And I remember last year you and I freaking out in November about their start. So it's like, it's just kind of funny, like what a championship does for the vibes and the mood and the zone. And I'm totally with you. Like the first comment we got in this chat segment tonight was Nuggets didn't try very hard tonight. Move on. Pretty much like this was one to throw away. You're on the road versus a team that didn't have Donovan Mitchell. Like this is a bad loss. I'm not going to like try and sugarcoat this one where it's like, yeah, it was a bad loss. They get to have bad losses because they won the title, and every team's going to have them throughout the season. Like you just get to have these games. Now it's 2 in a row. Do they bounce back tomorrow on the back-to-back versus Detroit? Probably. That's the worst team in the association. If they were to lose that, then it's like, all right, is losing habit starting to get to them a little bit? You mentioned the fatigue stuff. It's one of those things where it's like, from a logical deduction standpoint, if you're like, Jokic is tired, he looks tired to me, I immediately go to how hard I saw him play at the end of that stretch. And we talked about this on last week's show on Wednesday about they pushed so hard through that schedule stretch. And I'm of the mindset that every time that you make a push in the regular season, there's a cost to it, right? Like if you don't try, you fall behind in standings. If you try too much, you fall behind in maintaining fatigue and like the maintenance of that. And that balance, I think, is really difficult. And so it's like they got hit with a pretty tough early schedule, but it's also just what sucks is you go through the early schedule and their break was 3 days. Like that's how the NBA is. It's like, oh, you got through the tough part. You get 3 days off and then you're right back at it every other day.
Yeah. I mean, they have some ups and downs here, obviously a back-to-back tomorrow. But look, you have to manage it. This is why Jamal Murray going down is so tough, is because Jokic comes into the season and kind of has to sprint out the gate. And I just feel like he might have hit a little bit of a wall 3-4 days ago or games ago, whatever it was. And even though he's had some monster performances, they look like they are very effortful from him. But the guy I wanted to talk about today, the other guy that I thought was interesting was Michael Porter, who made some shots tonight, 5 of 9 shooting. I think he was 7 for 15 overall, but I hated his game tonight. I actually thought, one, defensively, he was really rough, just blown assignments. And it just, the thing I wonder about, and then offensively, I just didn't think it was with, I think he came out with a mind frame of, I've got to contribute some scoring, which is true. The Nuggets need his scoring, while Murray's down, but almost like he was only has the ability to tilt the scales in one or the other, not like the ability to add to, but just sort of to take from one to go to the other. And this game tonight, right out of the gate, I just thought, his shot was there. He was being aggressive. I like that he was being aggressive with his shot, but it seemed to come at the expense of everything else. And I just thought, I don't think it's a coincidence that he was a minus 31 tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that absolutely tracks with the eye test. This to me was probably the third out of 4 games that I think his defense has been poor. I thought he was bad in Houston. I thought he was bad in New Orleans. I thought he was bad in Denver and Cleveland, and they lost all 3 of those games, right? So there's a little bit of like, was a confirmation bias, like they lost, so you think. I'm like, no, like when I watched those games, I genuinely did see blown assignments, not the wrong closeouts, little mistakes that he hasn't been making, those kind of problems. And this unit, I do think, as good as the offense, I think will continue to be, because I think some of these guys will come out of their slumps. And like I have some stuff in the second segment about Aaron Gordon I want to get to. But I kind of agree with you that I think that MPJ is having a hard time balancing, trying to pick up for Jamal's absence offensively while still being the solid defender he was. And like, you can't let the other slip. It's going to have to be both. You can manage it a little bit, but you got to do whatever you have to maintain those things being a little bit scaled evenly.
Yeah. And I like this comment too. He's got to stop knocking the rebounds out of his teammates' hands. I swear to God, he does this like once a game, but he did it like 3 or 4 times today. And I don't, it's very confusing. He has such bad hands.
On the other side, I want to talk about who's got to step up. So up next, we'll get into who needs to give the Nuggets a little bit more, because it's not Nikola Jokic. So who's got to give them a little bit more? We'll talk about that up next. Right now, I want to tell you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is going to be the most fun that you'll have playing daily fantasy sports. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less than their projected stats, and place your entry. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. So you can create all sorts of great combinations between Nikola Jokic and Russell Wilson, all sorts of combos for whatever you're looking to play. Want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. They even offer a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play even if one of your guys gets injured. For football and basketball, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA with a promo code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Monday, getting you set for the holiday week. Hope you guys are going to have a safe, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving week if you choose to celebrate. So let's talk a little bit about who needs to step up for the Nuggets right now, because they have had the Clippers game was close and they lost to the Rockets. They've now lost 3 of 4, and that's not and a great situation I think for them to be in. And they're going to be on a road trip, right? And then part of this is they're not going to be as good on the road as they are at home. Part of this is I think we're talking about how they need to be better to accomplish goals, like if they want to get a 1 seed, if they want to get a top 2 seed, right? Because they're going to be largely fine because Jamal will presumably be back at some point in the relatively near future. And then they will be instantly just good enough to get past some of these games. The guy that I will say that I think he's played phenomenal this year, and I don't think that necessarily he's gotten enough credit for it, and I'm always kind of in this guy's corner anyway. But one guy I do think needs to step up is Aaron Gordon. And
I think he's struggled over the last half of games. I think he had a really good start and has struggled as it's gone on.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of this is simply going to have to be I don't know that playing him with the bench units is getting the kind of success that they needed, and a lot of that I think staggering AG makes sense when he's with Jamal. I'm not sure it makes sense otherwise, because I just don't find that he's able to be effective with that second unit, given how simplistic and direct that team needs to be. I kind of understand it, because it's well, look, if they're all athleticism and speed and AG's hyper athletic and able to handle and make plays, isn't that a good combo? But I think that when we talk about the spacing, I've talked about how that's not everything, but it does matter. And so I think having a guy that doesn't necessarily space the floor for you effectively, even in kind of a point forward kind of role, I don't think it necessarily adds a whole lot. But AG, I just think has got to be better just in terms of adding some components and soaring a little bit more. And maybe that means not just relying on the simple stuff with AG or with Jokic in the 2-man game. Maybe it means varying up some of his attack. Maybe it means the coaching staff getting him in some different spots. But I do feel like he's going to have to fill in a little bit more offensively for them to keep pace.
Well, for starters, he's got to start making free throws. I mean, that's part of it. Is I almost wonder if it's affecting how he's attacking because he's so in his head about free throws. I don't know, but he's shooting 52.5%, which is really low, and his shooting overall has really suffered this year. He's not taking a lot of threes. He doesn't seem very confident with it. Teams know that and are playing off of him. And then, when he gets to the line, he just has a handful of 0 for 2s in key moments. So I actually agree with you that he has to step up, but I actually think he has to step up more in his main role than it is as the bench unit. I mean, the bench unit has a lot of issues. I know we're going to talk about it next. But right now, I'm more concerned about Denver's best punch needs to be better than it has been.
The Nuggets are dead last in free throw percentage this season. They are the worst team in the league at shooting free throws. The Raptors are second at 71.4.
What's Denver at? What percentage?
71% flat. I don't know what a solve for that is, personally. I don't know what that is other than make your free throws. It's okay, are they not trying to make their free throws? I don't know what needs to be kind of the fix for that. I'm curious as to if you have thoughts on what they can do to kind of address that, because they got to get that out of the bottom 10. You just got to be fine, I think, at free throws. Because
so the three guys I think you look at are Aaron Gordon, who's at 52%, Reggie Jackson, who's at 60%, surprisingly, and then Michael Porter, who's down all the way at 75%. I think everybody else just looking at it is kind of at their averages. I mean, I'm surprised to see that Jokic is shooting 79%, which I think is pretty much in line with his average. I'm kind of surprised by that. It feels like it's worse.
Yeah, it feels like it's worse than it has been. Reggie, I don't really know. I don't think I wonder how many has Reggie taken this season?
Total? He's taking 1.5 a game. So I don't know what it is total. So 20
that to me
maybe.
Feels like a lot of that. Like Reggie, it feels not necessarily say that I trust him 100%, but just that it's such a small sample, it goes in that direction. AG and MPJ I think are much bigger problems. Like MPJ in particular has got to be he's got to get that into the 80s. Like you just got to be you're a good enough shooter. There's zero reason why I can think that he would be a sub 80% free throw shooter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. It is the same thing. He's 12 of 16. So if he was 13 of 16, he'd be good. So he's basically one make below what he needs to be. But Aaron Gordon, to me, I actually do have it in here that I just think he's been struggling a little bit over the last little stretch. Michael Porter, again, we talked about it in the first stint, but he needs to shoot as well as he did today while playing as well as he did at the early start of the year. And then KCP's defense has been so good this year that it's hard to critique him, but he has been a pretty absent offensive player for most of the year. I'm trying to look and see what his numbers are compared to last year, and I don't have it in front of me, but he has a handful of games where he's just not scoring. Yeah, he's only down a point. He's 1.5 points a game.
This was only the second game this year where KCP was a negative in plus minus. He was a minus 20 versus Minnesota, and he was a minus 13 versus Cleveland. Other than that, he's been positive. But look, he was 3 of 7 versus the Pels and 2 of 9 in this one. And, you're going to still get pretty quality looks. It's important to be able to knock them down. And especially, I'll say this, a lot of Denver's success last season offensively was predicated upon they had really great shooting. Now, they created great shots out of, from rhythm play because of Nikola. But that's the other side of it is if you're getting great looks, you should be able to knock them down. And that's how the team is built. So KCP, I think the bar for efficiency has to be pretty high where he's not going to have a big role. So when he does get shots, it's important that those shots are ones that he's able to make. And again, I always struggle with how do you get good shooters historically to shoot better, but it is going to have to be, I think, a little bit of him adding something offensively, just in terms of capitalizing on the opportunities that he's been given.
All right. No, 100%. I will say, though, we're dancing around this. We know what the real problem is. It's that the Nuggets' bench every year, not just this year, but every single year has the same story. Yeah. Every year when conditions are perfect, okay, something of a functional bench there, we'll see. But the moment there's any disruption, it all of a sudden just falls completely apart. And to me, there's a lot of guys right now without confidence. I always find it interesting because we talked about this. Malone has a tough job with this bench. We talked about how Peyton Watson, is he the odd man out if you're going to try to bring someone new into the rotation, even though we don't really feel like it's his fault that the bench is there? It makes sense. Well, you pull him out tonight, didn't make a difference. He doesn't play, Holiday does. The bench was just as bad as it always is. So I do think that there's a little bit of we know what the problem is. It's the bench, and it's all of the guys off of that second unit who all seem to be going through a crisis of confidence and who all just seem to be wholly incompetent on the offensive end.
I want to talk about the team's makeup. I want to talk about the team's identity, and I want to talk about how to properly analyze the bench guys in the context of both the season and in the team. I will do that up next. Right now, I want to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So you can bet on those streaking Denver Broncos. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app's so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. All right, it's time to talk about the bench. There's a lot I think we can get to. And it's, you kind of mentioned it's the same story every single year. So it gets tiresome, right? It's like, okay, like the bench is bad again. Does it really matter? Like they're going to be, they're only going to play 7 guys in the playoffs anyway, but they're going to have to get through this regular season. Like that's kind of the different challenge of the season is you're not trying to prove anything in the regular season. You're trying to manage the regular season and get through it. And the bench matters for doing that. That's how you keep your starters' minutes down. That's how you allow guys for rest. That's how you build margins so that you don't have to bring guys back in. Like the bench does play a really important role in the regular season. It can play one in the playoffs, but I think we feel pretty confident in 6 and 7 can probably play in the playoffs. I have like more complex thoughts on this, but it's also, as much as we will kvetch about this, so much of this is about just like, they just need to find something to get them through the next 70 games, right?
Yeah. I mean, no question about it. And then, of course, their home record versus road record split probably hints at a lot of this as well, that you expect role players to play a little bit better at home. But here's the thing, Matt. This seems to be a uniquely Denver problem. Every team has good and bad bench stretches or what have you, but Denver has cycled through so many different versions of bench players, including veteran benches, young benches, mixed benches, and they seem to always be bad. And I'm looking at who beat Denver off the bench tonight. George Niang, Tristan Thompson, Sam Merrill, Craig Porter. Like, that's not an all-star team.
No.
That's not a great bench.
No.
And yet here they make Denver's bench look like completely helpless. And I look at it and I go, okay, then you stagger because it's not the bench. Here's my point. It's not the bench. It's the non-Jokic minutes. And I don't understand. We almost have to factor into Jokic's great advanced metrics that there seems to be something about him that makes a team incompetent whenever he's gone. Like it seems every single year. And I don't think it's his fault. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you can blame Jokic for a team being bad when he's not on the court. But there just seems to be something that none of these guys seem to know what to do when he's not there. And that goes for Christian Braun, who's had a couple good games here recently. That goes for Zeke Naji, who's probably the worst looking player right now in all of the rotation. It goes for anybody that comes off the bench for the Nuggets and tries to play actual minutes. And even Julian Strawther tonight, who I actually really liked, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But to me, it's just a recurring theme, Matt. We've done this together now for like 5 seasons.
Yeah, and it gets tiresome. I think I've hinted at this before, and I do believe it, which is this team is built like Peyton Watson, hyper athletic, long player that can defend at a high level, play in transition and cut. Christian Braun, theoretical 3-and-D slasher, big wing, hyper. Like these guys are all molded in terms of if they had to play with Jokic, they would fit well with Jokic, like the whole athletic guys around Joker thing. But the problem, and I continue to have this issue, is there has never been a move to solve the fact that if you're going to have everybody geared to play Jokic ball, you've got to be able to run a facsimile of that with the second unit. Like
the only time it's worked is when you've had Mason Plumlee, to your point on that.
Yeah. Like you have to have some sort of facsimile, just somebody. I want to ask you on Zeke, because you brought up the pick and pop stuff before, and I haven't done the film on it. And I want to get Malone's thoughts on it the next time that they're home in 7 years, apparently. But like, I want to get your thoughts on, I wonder if there's something about the way and Zeke's ability to screen and how teams defend those actions that makes them more hesitant, or if it's simply like, it's just not part of that second unit's offense, which is weird. Cause I'm like, if if it's already part of the offense with Nikola, why wouldn't it be part of the offense with Zeke Naji in that second unit?
Well,
because that's one of the only things that Zeke can do that replicates an action that Nikola does.
I think the thing is that what Nikola does is complicated. It requires an incredible feel for the game. It's not just about like you hit the guy here, you screen like this. Like you have to be reading what's going on and then adjusting. And I think that Zeke is probably the worst on the team at reading the court. And I think Michael Porter is probably the second worst player on the team at reading the court. So Zeke, putting him at the fulcrum when he's not necessarily designed to be doing that, I think is tough. But right now, the thing that I am wondering, and again, I don't know if this is a solve, Matt, because I've told you repeatedly, I don't know that there's like a one thing you change and everything gets fixed with the bench. But Zeke as a lob threat to me just doesn't make sense. The best thing you can say about Zeke this year is that he's drawn fouls and offensive rebounds. Like he's working really hard, but is that worth sort of like, is that worth it? Is that really that positive a thing? Was he dominating the offensive glass tonight in a way that was making an impact? No. So I just wonder, is there other stuff and other things you can have him do to open up the court? Maybe, maybe not. But right now, it's so hard for me to imagine Zeke Naji being a positive impact offensive player doing the things that they're doing.
Sean said
he did make a three tonight, by the way.
Yeah, he did. And he had 3 offensive rebounds. Like he is like, the thing is like Zeke's been a hustle junkie this season. He's been awesome in terms of the assertiveness and effort that you wanted to see from him has been there. But it's also like, what else you got? Because he was also like, hey, he's got some skill at these different things, and it's not necessarily translating. The defense is fine. It's just not like hugely impactful. Sean says this is so much kvetching acting like Jamal won't come back. I would say this. The bigger point here to me is actually not about like this stretch of games, about how to stop losing. They're gonna be fine. Okay. It's about, all right, well, this is what this looks like when Jamal goes down. Like, let's remove Joker because 1, he's the most endurant superstar I've ever seen, knock on wood. But 2, like obviously, like Joker goes out and everything, like that's a different equation. But if Aaron Gordon's got to miss a game, if MPJ's back tightens up, if KCP's got knee soreness, like, is anybody as important as Jamal? No, absolutely not. But you're also seeing that the rotational effects when a starter is missing on the rest of the bench unit in particular gets really bad. Now, maybe it's better if it's like, no, Jamal can stagger with the second unit as long as he's back. And
yeah, so but people are forgetting that second unit didn't look good last year with Jamal running it. Jamal's not to fix all either. Jamal is sadly part of the non-Jokic problem, right? Even he struggles when he's not playing with Jokic, at least historically. This year, part of us hoping for the year of Jamal was that he could be a true second star, which is somebody that could stagger with the bench and have a positive bench. And early returns were good, by the way.
Yeah.
But it would be abnormal. This would be the first year. If that were the case throughout the whole season, this would have been the first year that would be true.
This is similar to Zeke, and it's similar, but it applies to all of them. I'm going to use Christian as an example, but this does apply to all the bench. I've been really underwhelmed by Christian this season overall. Like in general, I've been really underwhelmed. He had a great game versus New Orleans. He was fantastic. Best game of the season. Looked awesome.
The one before that too. I think it was 2. I think it was like 1.5 games in a row. I know it's small, but something.
Yeah. And that's important. And that's good. One of my things is, how much does it matter? This is what's really interesting is, if I ask the question, how much does it matter how Christian performs when he's next to Nikola? The answer is, for the regular season problems, not at all. And for the postseason, a very high degree. He needs to be playable in the playoffs next to Nikola, because Nikola is going to be on the floor for roughly 38 to 40 minutes a game. So if you're going to be on the court, you're probably going to be on the court with them, and you need to know how to play next to Nikola. And that works, I think, really great. But for solving their regular season problems, I continue to kind of be like, I need to see more from Christian in the non-Jokic minutes to be able to like adequately evaluate him. And honestly, maybe some of this is Reggie too. And maybe some of this is like the other guys. I need to look at the splits of exactly how many guys have spent time and when with Nikola. But that to me is kind of like part of this equation is, I don't want to dismiss the importance of being able to play effectively next to Nikola Jokic, because if you can't, why are you on this team? But also, if I know that everybody's going to look good next to Nikola, are you real? Like, would it be more valuable, honestly, for you to look a little worse with Nikola relative to the average player and better without him? You would ideally want to look both, but between the two, they need more help in the non-Jokic minutes.
I'm with you that Christian has not looked good, but here's the thing. It's not just that he looks good with Jokic. He's looked phenomenal. Like, he looks like a phenomenal Jokic player, not just like everybody looks good with him.
Sure.
Right now, they have the best two-man net rating of anybody to play minutes with Jokic, and that's on 180 minutes. That's about 200 possessions, a decent enough sample size. And what does it show you? The offense is just as good as ever, if not better, and the defense is really, really good, and that tracks. So, and the last thing is with Christian Braun, this might be a blueprint for the future. We know that the Nuggets are high on Christian Braun. Does he ever replace a KCP in the lineup? He doesn't shoot the ball very well, but his defense might be even more impactful, and some of the other stuff he does is really impactful. So I do think it's important. But the part of your question about this season and about right now, he has looked really bad on that second unit. But I look at it and I go, I don't know what they're trying to do with that unit. And that's part of what is so frustrating here is he's certainly not the solve for their offensive woes, because he doesn't really have anything to his offensive game. And I'm not sure he's going to have much to his offensive game.
Right.
Although he has been trying to attack the rim a lot more. I will say this. He's been going downhill more in the last few games to better results than he has for most of the year. But I don't think he's the type of a caliber of player that can fix it. I just think it does matter that he is good playing next to Jokic.
Yeah, I think and that's the thing, is like, I do think it matters, right? And especially, I can't on the one hand be like, it doesn't matter what you do with Nikola, and then also be like, well, you better be able to fill in if somebody gets hurt. Like, that's not congruent, right? So like, you've got to be able to do both, because there are going to be games where Christian's going to have to fill in for KCP, MPJ, or Aaron. Like, that's going to happen at some point.
Yeah. All right, I have a thought, and here it is, because the other guy that I really like next to Jokic is Julian Strawther. I loved what I saw from him today in the Jokic minutes, because he did all of the things that Michael Porter does, knock down shots and, move, cut, space, all of those types of things. And then defensively, he just didn't make mistakes. Like, to me, he was more locked in today on what he was supposed to do than even Michael Porter was on the defensive end. So I look at that and I go, Malone has always loved his best punch, and for good reason. We understand that starting five, one of the best starting fives in all of basketball, and come playoffs, they're going to play a lot together. But I do wonder if the recipe for getting through the regular season is Strawther looks good next to Jokic, Christian looks good next to Jokic. Those guys should play with Jokic. And I wonder if the rest of the guys you need to worry a little bit less about them. Aaron Gordon plays great with Jokic. I would try to handcuff Aaron Gordon to Jokic as much as possible as well. And now you have the makings of a rotation, because those are the guys you'd be trying to play. And that means KCP and Michael Porter are going to have to stagger, which, again, at least on paper, makes sense to me. If you truly are going to try to go to a Jalen Pickett-led second unit in the absence of Jamal Murray, giving him your two best shooters is a really good start.
Yeah. I mentioned a lot about in the preseason about like the veterans that maybe they should have added to the roster, or could have, like, the risk that they were taking on. I got a question today that was like, who could they afford? And the answer is like, nobody that was really impactful. Like, I'm not going to I don't go so far on this where I'm like, if they'd only signed Ish Wainwright, come on, like, Ish Wainwright's not making a difference in the Pelicans game, let alone today. Right. I think Peyton's in an interesting place. I think it's interesting that he was the odd man out today. I don't know that like this was a great spot to evaluate Justin Holiday. And I don't know that I'm not going to sit here and be like, it could be awesome. I don't know. I think
he's just not going to save it. He's not going to save the line. It's not that he deserves or doesn't deserve. It's just like, what are we doing?
The only guy I think you can honestly say that could like fix this not fix, but that could really do the job of what you're looking for. Like, it's Kelly Olynyk. Like, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that type of and those guys are hard to find in terms of guys that run handoffs that much. It's not just handoffs. It's about being able to play at that spot. Read the floor. Like, those kind of guys are tough to find. Like, it's just really tough to find. And so like trying to find replacement of those options, I think is really difficult. Ultimately we're not filling time. I think this stuff's interesting. It's also just like neither one of us are like, oh, the Nuggets are in trouble. We're just like, this is the thing that's going on with the team, and it's going to continue going on with the team until they find a big that could do this. And you know what? The answer to that question of who would that be? It was Vlatko. That's what's like a big missing component. I do think it would have made
a difference. Yeah. Let's say this though, Matt. Who's the biggest problem off the bench right now, in your opinion?
Ooh, gosh.
I think it's easy.
Oh, you think it's easy? Okay. Who's the biggest problem?
I think it's Zeke Naji. I mean, Zeke is just like is really rough at the moment. And to me, again, I try to let him off the hook a little bit just because he's in such a tough spot. He's in such a tough role. And I don't love that the Nuggets are trying to roll him to the rim and throw lobs to him and this or that. But at the same time, his skill set is just becoming so narrow that at the moment there's so many nights where it just doesn't make any impact at all.
Do you feel like he could do more? Like, do you feel like that, like, is part of the problem that usually we talk about could do more? It's like there's all this potential, but instead is it like Zeke's not going to be successful in a narrow role. He's only going to be successful in a wide, varied role where he makes an impact in a lot of different ways. Is that?
I mean, he's got to be a shooter. If he's not a shooter, I don't know what the appeal is of him, because as much as he's a good defender, like, okay, there are good defenders out there in the NBA. A lot of them can't shoot, and that's the problem with them is they can't shoot. Zeke Naji, we're told, is a shooter. He's not a great rebounder. He's not a great ball handler. He's not a great decision maker. He's not a great cutter. He doesn't play the dunker spot particularly well. So I don't understand. So to me, it's like you got to find out if this guy's a shooter, and you got to treat him as such. And right now the Nuggets, and here's the other thing about it. When I look at the second unit, I just don't think a lot. Like Peyton doesn't seem to have a ton of confidence. Zeke doesn't seem to have a lot of confidence. Christian Braun seems to be trying to fight through a lack of confidence right now. And part of me goes, when you have a guy who worked on his three-point shot for the last 2 years with his dedication of trying to become a good three-point shooter, and then you tell him to never pop to the spot where he's going to take a three, I just wonder if he's like, they don't want me shooting because they don't believe it. And maybe they don't believe it because he can't shoot, Matt. Like, I don't know. Nobody on the team seems to think he is a shooter, but that's just what he was billed as.
Yeah, and that's interesting that like he's never talked about it in like the shooting competitions, right? Like no one ever talks about him in any of the like he was really great today or he shut the hell out of the ball. Like none of that. Like we've never really heard that from those guys. Those guys talk a lot if somebody's a great shooter, and that's never been kind of mentioned about him.
And sometimes it's guys that aren't even that good of shooter, like Justin Holiday, where they were talking about what an incredible shooter he was, and Justin Holiday's a good shooter, but he. You know what I mean? Like, so Zeke, you think there would be a day or two here or there. I don't, just to me, that's the thing I wonder is I doesn't feel Malone has had the quickest hook on him in particular of anybody. And, you know, they're not having him shoot. And I just wonder if there's like a sense of nobody on this team really has confidence in me to do anything. And I just have to go try to rebound as hard as I can. And he's okay at that. He's okay.
Did they beat the Pistons on the back-to-back?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, look, tonight Jokic didn't have it.
Yeah,
Jokic got a decent rest, and I think he'll have it tomorrow. And then they're going up against some really, really bad. I mean, Isaiah Stewart works hard. Isaiah Stewart's a tough guy for Jokic to go up against, but all the guys behind him are you know, he should be able to feast.
Magic's going to be a tough game. That team's pretty good. That's going to be a tough game later in the week. And we'll cover it all here for you here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to hit the YouTube page, youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. We will see you tomorrow. Swipa and I will be with you to recap the Pistons game, and then we'll carry on throughout the week here on Locked On Nuggets.